You know, when you think about where your tablet came from, you probably picture a lab in Silicon Valley, right? Well, what if I told you the real story starts way earlier, on a Hollywood film set, all the way back in 1968? Okay, so let's get right into it. And look, this isn't some fan theory or a wild guess. This is straight from the source. Steve Jobs himself said clear as day that a sci-fi movie gave him the vision he wanted to build. That's the story we're unpacking today. That straight line from a movie screen right into Silicon Valley. All right, so to really get this, we've got to go back, way back. We're heading to 1968 to look at the exact blueprint that Stanley Kubrick laid out in his masterpiece, 2001: A Space Odyssey. So picture this. In the quiet, almost sterile setting of the Discovery 1 spacecraft, you see the astronauts Dave and Frank, just kind of relaxing. They're not flipping through magazines, they're watching videos on these thin, glowing rectangles. Now, for audiences in '68, this was pure fantasy. For us, it's just an average Tuesday. And what's just mind-blowing is how specific this vision was. I mean, this wasn't some generic futuristic gadget. It was practically a technical spec sheet. A flat screen, touch interface, high-def color, no keyboard. I mean, come on. It's like Kubrick wrote the product requirements doc 40 years before the tech even existed. So you have this amazing idea just sitting there in a movie. How does it become a real product? Well, it has to land in the mind of someone with the vision and the obsession to make it happen. And that person was Steve Jobs. You see, the film didn't just spark a random idea. It created what you could call an inspirational blueprint. This wasn't some vague concept of a portable computer. No, it was a very specific, very desirable image of what that computer should look like, feel like, and act like. It became a clear target for engineers to aim for. And this wasn't just a Steve Jobs thing either. It went deep into Apple's design culture. Johnny Ive, the guy who actually designed the iPad, said that tablet from the movie was their North Star. It was the absolute essence of what a computer could be, just a pure, magical sheet of glass. But okay, having a perfect vision is one thing. Building it, that's a whole different ballgame. This was not an overnight success story. It was a long, brutal journey filled with technical dead ends and, yeah, some pretty big commercial failures. I mean, just look at this timeline. 42 years. Think about that for a second. That's how long it took to get from that idea on screen to a real product in our hands. And along the way, you had these other concepts and these other attempts, like Apple's own Newton, which, tried to get there but just couldn't quite stick the landing. Now, to be fair, other brilliant people were thinking about portable computers. Alan Kay's Dynabook concept was technically powerful. But here's the key difference. Kubrick's Newspad created the cultural icon. It wasn't just a functional tool, it was this cool, desirable object that made people actually want to live in that future. And all of that brings us to 2010. This is the moment the journey ends. It's the climax of the story, where that 42-year-old sci-fi prophecy finally becomes reality for all of us. And when he got on that stage to launch the iPad, Steve Jobs didn't hide the connection. He celebrated it. He literally called it a magical device straight out of science fiction. He was basically winking at the world and saying, yeah, we finally built the thing from the movie. And here's where it all comes together. The proof is right here. Just look at this side by side. The format, it's almost identical. The interface, touching the screen directly, check. And what are they used for? Reading news, watching videos. It's a perfect match. The 2010 iPad isn't just inspired by Kubrick's vision, it's the direct fulfillment of it. Of course, there is one tiny area where reality is still lagging a bit behind the fiction. The tablets in the movie seem to have infinite battery life and were apparently indestructible. And I think we can all agree we're still waiting for that particular feature update. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. Making this vision a reality didn't just create a hit product. It set off a chain reaction, a wave that completely changed how we think about computers, media, and, well, our everyday lives. And the impact wasn't a slow burn. It was an absolute explosion. In its very first 3 months on the market, Apple sold 3 million iPads. That was just the beginning. That initial spark turned into a wildfire. By 2023, the global total of tablets sold shot past 1.28 times billion. And in money terms, we're talking about a brand new market, a whole new category that didn't exist before, now worth over $63 billion every single year. But the real proof of that original design's power? It didn't just create one popular product, it created the industry standard. Samsung, Microsoft, Amazon, pretty much everybody followed that Kubrick-inspired blueprint. It became the universal definition of what a tablet is. So when you boil this whole story down, the takeaway is pretty simple, but it's also really profound. Science fiction didn't just predict the future here. It was more like an architectural drawing, a blueprint so clear and so compelling that engineers spent decades of their lives trying to make it real. So it took 42 years for Kubrick's vision to land in our hands. Which really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What science fiction ideas are we watching on our screens right now that engineers in some lab are desperately trying to build for our future?